Welcome back to the Grease Goblins Rereads channel. Today's video, we're going to be hitting Bran 6, A Clash of Kings. This is Bran's second to last chapter. We will not see this character again until the very end of A Clash of Kings. So again, it's really sombering feeling when you're getting to the end of a lot of plot lines like Bran and Catelyn. Catelyn is going to end very shortly here soon, but it's really interesting to think about. We're getting really into the back third of the book, and I would say really deep into it. We're not even that far away from the Battle of the Blackwater. Bran 6 is really placed well. Something I constantly say about, I would say especially the first three books. I do think in book 5, great job. Have my criticisms of book 4 in the way that George places chapters. So what do I mean by that? Last chapter was Catelyn 6. This is really the heights of Robb's campaign. It's the best it's going to get. Robb is winning battles in the West, and right now we don't know that Robb wanted Edmure to actually let Tywin into the West, but from the knowledge that we have, Edmure has won this huge victory on the Red Fork, the Battle of the Stone Mill. Everything is going well right now. The Stark camp can't lose any battles. But just how the way that chapter ends with Catelyn having all of these doubts, even though they're winning the way she does. And George almost in a way confirms her doubts. Things are not going well, even though we know in hindsight that the Battle of the Red Fork was actually, in a lot of ways, a massive loss for the Stark campaign. We don't know that yet. So in the book right now, we then go to Bran 6. And this is where everything flips on its head. Bran, I've criticized as being a POV that is similar to Jon and Dany, where he doesn't have a huge amount of relevance. He's not a character that can move around much. There isn't a lot of action that happens in his chapters. His chapters are really focused on building the northern politics that for the most part really won't get paid off until A Dance with Dragons, and building up his magical abilities, the characters of the Reeds, all of that stuff, and the prophesizing of Theon taking Winterfell, or the sea coming to Winterfell. And this chapter is going to open in an interesting note, because George could have had the taking of Winterfell happen a number of different ways. He could have had it through Theon's POV. He could have had it through, well, Bran waking up and seeing the castle has been taken, but he doesn't choose any of those. George decides to start with Bran warged inside of Summer, and that'll get us into page 498. Bran in Summer's body hears a faint clink and scrape of steel on stone, and it makes him lift his head and listen. The recent rain has intensified his sense. Grass, thorns, crushed blackberries, mud, worms, rotting leaves, and a rat in the bushes. When Bran is in Summer's skin, in a lot of ways, Bran has very little control over Summer, especially at this point of the story. And you'll see as this chapter starts going, he'll get more and more control over Summer. He'll be able to dictate Summer's actions to a degree. And it's interesting because remember, we're in Summer's skin. Summer is a direwolf. Summer doesn't know what humans do, any of those things. Summer's very intelligent, but it doesn't know all those things. And so when we're getting this open to this chapter, it's left very much up to the reader to understand what George is trying to tell you. What is this faint clink and scrape of steel on stone? What is that actually? And we know that's to be, well, Theon and his men right now are climbing. We know that Theon has sent men to climb into Winterfell and open a postern gate. That's what's happening. But that's not made exactly clear as a reader because you're hearing this information through Summer. He smells his black-furred brother and the blood of a squirrel he killed, along with other frightened squirrels above. The sound then comes again, prompting him to rise, ears pricked and tail raised. Because maybe the first time when he was hearing this, it was a little unusual, but now the second time confirms something is going on. Summer howls a long, deep cry to wake the sleepers, but the human dwellings remain dark and still. And remember, if you're in Winterfell, you've gotten very accustomed to hearing the direwolves howl. This isn't an unusual sound, so it's not necessarily going to wake anyone, but it is a desperate attempt to sound an alarm. His black-furred brother approaches quietly, fur bristling, also sensing the danger. This time, the clink and scrape are followed by a slithering sound and the soft steps of bare feet on stone. At this point now, the men Theon has sent have now made it to the top of the wall and are now making their way to open the gate. This is where everything will collapse for really House Stark and Winterfell as a whole. The wind carries an unfamiliar man scent, a stranger, which meant danger or even death. And that's the confirmation you need. At this point, you'd start to realize, okay, Theon had already foreshadowed he was going to take Winterfell, And now you have the direwolves being very alert and aware of something new being in Winterfell. And it seems like someone is trying to get into Winterfell. As we get into page 499, Summer runs towards the sound with his black-furred brother alongside him. They reach the stone dens with wet walls, but the human structures take no notice of them. A gate with a coiled black iron snake blocks the way as he crashes into it, but it holds. It's the same thing we've already seen in this book of the wolves are trying to get out. They don't want to be kept in captivity, but they're also trying to warn people, trying to get rid of this danger that they can sense towards, that the direwolves can sense for Bran and Rickon. But there is no escape. These are man-made structures and walls. The wolves really seem to have no way of getting out. Summer can only fit his muzzle through the bars and recalls past failed attempts to break or dig under the gate. Snarling, he paces, then slams into the gate again, but it remains locked and chained. A whisper he does not hear but somehow senses tells him the other ways are closed too. Now, we know that this is Bran basically suggesting what needs to be done. Like, you need to climb the tree. That is the only possible way. It's interesting because up to this point, we really hadn't seen this. Bran had not really been in control of Summer whatsoever. And you're seeing Bran's powers start to awaken. He's becoming, well, what Jojen prophesizes as the winged wolf. Really interesting the way that develops. As danger is getting closer, Bran is starting to get his powers really awakened and his connection with his direwolf. The whisper shows him an image of a tall, needle-covered tree, a sentinel on the other side of the Godswood, and urges him to hurry. And it even is a nice connection to Bran because Bran used to climb a lot. And so it makes sense that his first solution to Summer would be, we can climb over these walls. We can get through and warn people that way. He quickly races back into the trees, his brother following close behind. They pass under the heart tree, around the cold pool, through blackberry bushes and under oaks, ash, and hawthorn to the far side of the Godswood. There they find the leaning sentinel tree pointing towards the rooftops, just as in the vision. He recalls what it was like for a boy to climb the tree, closed branches like a ladder leaning towards the roof with pine needles, sap, and scent. Summer is more or less getting those memories of what Bran used to do, doing all this climbing before his fall, and that is what Bran is trying to get Summer to do, to escape their, more or less, prison. Growling, he sniffs the tree's base, marks it with his urine, then bites and twists at a low branch until it cracks, filling his mouth with needles and bitter sap. Bran is trying to get a direwolf to climb a tree. It's not the best idea. They're not really made for climbing trees, as Bran is going to find out. As we get into page 500, his black-furred brother sits back and howls a mourning song, knowing they cannot climb trees like squirrels or men's children. They know the danger. They know. The direwolves know this is a dire situation, but Shaggy Dog has already kind of come to the conclusion there's nothing they can do. Summer is not willing to accept this, and with Bran's more or less influence, is going to try and climb the tree. Beyond the stone walls, dogs begin barking in response to the scent of enemies and fear. Even the dogs have now picked it up, and at this point, people might start waking, but it's already too late. The Greyjoy men are in the castle. Filled with desperate fury, he runs beneath the trees, then suddenly charges back towards the leaning tree. In his mind, he is hunting an antlered stag driven by the smell of fear. He bounds up the fallen tree trunk, climbing quickly into the lower branches. Branches tangle his feet, needles scatter, and the slope grows steeper and slippery with wet bark. He reaches nearly halfway to the roof, but loses his footing on the wet curve of the trunk. Sliding and stumbling, he falls, and Bran wakes in his tower bed, tangled in blankets and breathing hard. And this is really interesting because a lot of this chapter is going to be almost that full circle moment from book 1, where we started out the story at Winterfell. It was like our safe place, our safe haven for the Starks, and you slowly see all of them start to leave Winterfell and go into the dangers and perils of the world. Winterfell in a lot of ways represents our safe place in the story. Bran has been a safe character for so long, and that's kind of the end of that, right? Where the Greyjoys have now taken over. Eventually, in the last chapter, we're going to see the castle has been sacked and burned. It's kind of the same here with Bran having this full circle moment of him falling as, well, Bran himself, losing his legs and really his powers being awakened. Now we see that reflected here with Summer, and he's growing more and more influential over his direwolf. Bran calls for Summer, feeling a ghost ache in his shoulder from his wolf's fall. Again, it just shows you that connection and the way that they are very much connected in terms of, we'll see this a lot more with Robb in the next book with Grey Wind. It's very important that George is establishing that here, as well for a character like Arya, as she has a really big important moment in the next book as well with Lady Stoneheart. He then recalls Jojen's warning that he is a beastly, and he seems now to accept that he is one. Outside, dogs bark faintly, and Bran remembers Jojen's vision of the sea flowing over Winterfell's walls. Bran knows something is wrong. He has to do something, but what can he truly do? He's not able to walk around. All he can do is try and shout to bring someone to his aid. Bran pulls himself up on the bar above his bed and shouts for help, but no one comes. The guard has been removed from his door, because remember, we had already seen that Roderick had taken a lot of the fighting men and basically fallen directly into Theon's trap. And that's led to a situation where Winterfell's security is very laxed. There's not a lot of men here. And you can totally understand, if I was a guard at Winterfell, I'd be thinking, we are miles and miles from any type of conflict. If you were expecting some sort of Greyjoy raid, you would be expecting it on places in the West Coast. Winterfell is in the dead center of the North. You think about anyone trying to get to Winterfell from the South or the East, very unlikely. The North, you would think about maybe the Wildlings, but the Wildlings, I mean, they're not going to be able to siege Winterfell. They'd be going for other things. So if I was a Winterfell guard, I've got a nice, easy job, and I get to just kind of sit around. And unfortunately, that doesn't go well. And a lot of it comes back to nobody really believed Bran and Jojen's warnings, albeit it's kind of hard to accept their warnings just based off of dreams. 8 days earlier, 600 men had marched from Winterfell and nearby Holdfast. Clay Kerwin was bringing 300 more to join them, and Maester Luwin had sent ravens to call levies from White Harbor, the Barrowlands, and the Wolfswood. So we're seeing just as all of the northern forces are being relocated from where maybe they're necessarily needed, as this was a whole ploy by Theon, and it's worked wonders. It's one of those things where I say, Theon can be very clever. In this chapter, Theon has a lot of moments where he's not clever. He's overly arrogant, and he doesn't think about things, but when Theon puts his mind to it, can be very intelligent. As we get into page 501, news had come that Torrhen's Square was under attack by Dagmar Cleftjaw. Old Nan's Tale claimed he couldn't be killed. He has this renown, and it's something that distracts the North, just like Theon said it would. Bran wonders if Dagmar could have won and moves to the window, opening the shutters to see a dark, sleeping Winterfell. So even this, we talk about the idea that the dogs barking, all of that kind of stuff, even then, it wasn't enough to wake the people of Winterfell. They were still caught off guard. He shouts for Hodor, Osha, Mira, Jojen, anyone who might hear and raise the alarm. But the door bursts open, and a strange man in leather and iron discs enters with a dirk and axe. This is not a man that Bran knows, and Bran right away questions who this person is. Theon Greyjoy then follows in, telling Bran they won't harm him. And if you're Bran, you've got to be thinking, oh, well, Theon was sent back up to the north for some reason. Maybe it was to deal with the Ironborn Raiders. Maybe it was to deal with some other northern politics, the issues over the Hornwood land. But no. As Bran is relieved, he asks if Robb sent Theon. Theon says Robb is far away and can't help. And this right away is something that Bran picks up on. Help. Why would Bran need help? You know, Bran has grown up with Theon always being around, and here is Theon betraying him. As Theon declares himself Prince Theon and says he has taken Winterfell. He explains 4 men climb the walls with grapples, opened a postern gate, and his men are securing the castle as they speak. It's a very brilliant plan by Theon that really took the castle without losing anyone. Theon says Bran and Rickon are now his wards and instructs Bran to tell everyone in the Great Hall that he has yielded Winterfell and to obey their new lord. Bran refuses, saying they'll fight, and he never yielded. This is the issue you run into, because if you do try and fight Theon, he could easily put everybody in the castle to the sword and just rule over the castle by himself. Now, it's not a great plan, because then you don't have servants, you don't have cooks, you don't have people to keep up the upkeep of Winterfell is the big issue you run into. But it's the issue of Theon can now start threatening people against Bran, bringing out somebody, torturing them, killing them until Bran yields the castle, all of that kind of stuff. That's what you run into if you're Bran. And Bran's not thinking about that because he's a young boy, right? He's thinking, this is my castle. This is Robb's castle. I can't give it up to you, all that kind of stuff. And that's when Theon kind of tells him that. Theon warns him, this is not a game. The castle is his, but the people are Bran's. And if Bran wants them safe, he must comply. Now, Theon's smart here, but Theon also doesn't understand that these people are never going to back him. And that's just the truth. No matter what Theon does, Theon is going to try to be a gracious lord. He's going to try to be a good lord. But he's somebody that is not going to be respected by the people of Winterfell. Theon betrayed Robb, betrayed Ned, betrayed the Starks. He is going to be hated for the rest of his life. And so trying to take a castle like Winterfell and hold it with as few men as he does, while also wanting all these people to praise him and looking for validation somewhere, he's not going to get it here. That's the issue that Theon runs into. Theon leaves saying someone will dress and carry Bran to the Great Hall and tells him to think carefully about what he'll say. As we get into page 502, Bran waits in his room feeling helpless as he looks out at Winterfell's dark towers and walls. I really equate this to, in Book 1, when Bran gets attacked by the deserters and the wildlings, he feels helpless. We can't fight them. There's nothing he can do. It's the same idea here. Bran can't fight Theon Greyjoy. He can't fight the Greyjoys, throw them out of the castle. He has to comply. There's nothing else he can really do. He hears distant noises that might be shouting or sword clashes, but lacks Summer's sharp senses to confirm. And that's another thing that makes Bran feel even worse. Bran can't go into Summer and sense everything going on or fight back. He's forced to just wait. Expecting Hodor or a serving girl, Bran is surprised when Maester Luwin enters carrying a candle. And what's even worse is Luwin is injured with a cut above his eye, explaining that the Iron Men swam the moat, climbed the walls with hooks and ropes, and attacked. And that Theon now claims Winterfell as his own. And we even get confirmation that Jojen's dream was right. Alebelly was killed at the gate and Hayhead was wounded. Kind of just fulfilling that prophecy of people that would unfortunately fall victim to the Greyjoy invasion. Luwin managed to send 2 ravens. One reached White Harbor, but the other was shot down. It's again foreshadowing a lot of the idea that the Manderleys will be the future main pushers for the Starks' restoration after the Red Wedding. It's just a little bit of that foreshadowing. It's what A Clash of Kings does really well. A Clash of Kings is a great book for setting up the northern politics that George is going to explore in the 5th book. And what's crazy is, you think about it, we're in book 2. That's not going to get expanded upon until book 5, because book 3, well, Bran is no longer our northern POV into the politics going on. He's on the run, trying not to interact with anybody else. You have Jon, who's north of the wall for a good portion of A Storm of Swords, and then is worried about the wildling situation. You don't have time to worry about the issues in the northern politics. And then in book 4, the northern politics just aren't a thing because they're not in that book. So it's really interesting the way that George is so good as a writer that things like this will pay off massively later on in the story. Luwin blames himself for not foreseeing the danger, but Bran thinks of Jojen's warning and tells Luwin to help him dress. There's no reason worrying about it now. What is done is done. They can't go back. But I'll say this for Luwin. There's no way you could foresee Theon taking the castle. There just wasn't any idea, because there was just no way of that. Because for one, you would have to assume that somebody knew Winterfell well enough to be able to execute Theon's plan. And Theon is literally the only Ironborn that would be able to do that. And so there's no real logic to that idea. It's more just Luwin kind of regretting the actions that him and Rodrik took in sending men away from Winterfell. Luwin agrees, saying Bran is the Stark in Winterfell and Robb's heir and must look princely. While dressing, Luwin says there's no shame in yielding if it protects the small folk, and warns that the Ironborn are cruel. And Luwin is completely correct. You don't want to antagonize them more to where they start killing your people, the people you are sworn to protect. That is the contract between a lord and its people. Protect them, all that kind of stuff, and Bran knows what he must do. An Ironborn with a coal-black beard arrives to carry Bran, though reluctantly. On the way down, they stop at Rickon's chamber, where the boy wakes cranky and asks for his mother and Shaggy Dog. Luwin tells Rickon their mother is far away, but assures him he and Bran are there, then takes him by the hand and leads him out. Rickon doesn't understand what's happening. He's a young little boy, really, and this is just another part of the trauma that he's going to experience. It's very tragic, especially at someone so young, experiencing losing his home, all of that stuff. As we get into page 503, on the way down, Bran and the others encounter Mira and Jojen being herded from the rune by a bald Iron Man with an unusually tall spear. Jojen looks at Bran with sorrow in his green eyes. Remember, Reek kills Bran. Now, we know that's not the case, and also, if you're Jojen, you have to be questioning, why would you be sent to Winterfell to help Bran be awakened in his powers, but then have Bran immediately killed by someone like Reek? That's the important part here. The Frey wards are also rounded up as Little Walder taunts Bran that he is no longer a prince, but a hostage. But he also says a very important line that will be foundational to the next book. He utters the line that your brother has lost his kingdom. That's entirely true. Think about the perception of, really, the Northern Lords. Why should they back Robb if he can't even protect his own land? That's really important, because as I just got done talking about, the construct between a king, his lords, his small folk, is that he is going to do his best to protect them and put forward their best interests, right? If they're going to offer taxes to him, if they're going to offer all this stuff, he has to be, in turn, able to protect them. And if that is not the case, people will start to turn on him. But also the Freys are just assholes, as Jojen replies that they are all hostages, prompting Little Walder to insult him. An Iron Man with a torch leads the group, but Rain puts it out as they cross the yard. It really reflects the mood and the tone of the chapter, and I would say the Stark plot for the next book. Whereas a lot of times when we go to Catelyn's chapters in A Storm of Swords, a lot of the times the setting is very dark, rainy, gloomy. A lot of the happiness of that plot is now going to disappear. The last time we really saw any type of triumph or even happiness was Catelyn's last chapter, and even then, Catelyn herself never really felt that. She was kind of that foreshadowing to things to come. They hear direwolves howling in the Godswood, and Bran hopes Summer was not injured in the fall. In the Great Hall, Theon sits in Robb Stark's high seat, wearing a black surcoat with a golden kraken over fine mail. Rickon points out Theon is in Robb's chair, but Bran hushes him, sensing danger. Theon has finally gotten everything he ever wanted to be. He wanted to be a lord or a king or have respect and people to actually recognize him. And you see that in the way he seems to be soaking in, sitting in Ned Stark's chair, all that stuff. And Theon, when you think about the identity crisis that he currently has, it seems the best of both worlds. Stark and Greyjoy, he's now claiming the chair of the Lord of the Starks. The hall is dimly lit, with benches stacked against the walls and castle folk standing in small, silent groups. Bran notices old Nan Hayhead being carried and wounded, Poxy Tim weeping, and Beth Cassell crying. Theon asks about the new arrivals as Maester Luwin identifies the Freys and the Reeds and their purpose in Winterfell. This is really good news for Theon. It just means he has more captives. He has Frey hostages, and now he has Reed hostages. Theon notes that his ill timing for the Reeds as they were coming to swear fealty to Bran, but he orders Bran brought forward. The black-bearded Iron Man drops Bran roughly onto the stone floor like he was just some bag of oats or anything like that he wasn't really all that valuable. The Ironborn very much value strength, and when you have someone like Bran who is a cripple, he is somebody that is physically disabled, it's something that the Ironborn don't look fondly upon. I mean, a lot of Westeros doesn't, but especially a harsh and cruel culture like the Ironborn. More captives are driven into the hall with shouts and spear butts as Gage and Osha arrive from the kitchens, still dusted with flour, as Mycon is dragged in, cursing. Farlan limps in, supporting Paula, whose dress is torn and who walks in pain. Septon Chael tries to help her, but is knocked to the floor by an Ironman. And this is where we get to the point of it. Theon wants all these people to treat him with respect, to treat him as their lord, all of this stuff. But think of the way he operates and the way he allows the Ironmen to abuse the people of Winterfell, women, innocents, all that kind of stuff. How does he expect these people to ever come to respect or love him like they did someone like Ned Stark? And that's the error that Theon has. Theon and Tyrion, in a lot of ways, have the same issue. They want to be loved and they want to be respected, but they almost never can. And now for Theon, it's way different because Theon could do those things. He's put in a terrible situation with his family, especially his father, but he also, the way he acts and holds himself, is a lot of the reason why he isn't respected, why people don't care about him in a lot of ways. And even the people that did care about him, he's burning that. He's burning that bridge. And so that's the interesting part about this whole chapter, is the way Theon holds himself. As we get into page 504, the last captive is brought into the hall is Reek, whose foul smell makes Bran's stomach twist. His escort, a young ginger-haired ironman soaked from swimming the moat, explains he found Reek locked in a tower. Reek says that he served the bastard of the Dreadfort until the Starks killed him with an arrow as a wedding gift. Theon jokes crudely about Reek's stench and mocks the bastard's marriage to Lady Hornwood. Another thing is, Theon is not the most clever guy at times. He doesn't understand why would it be so beneficial to marry Lady Hornwood. Well, you get all of her lands, her incomes. It's a major power move for the northern dynamics. And Reek has to break that down to Theon. But at this is where it gets interesting, because Reek is being brought in. And if you're Jojen and you're Bran, who know this prophecy that Reek is going to help kill Bran, this is a big moment. The Iron Men then close the tall doors as Bran counts about 20 in the hall, guessing perhaps 30 total, including guards outside. Theon raises his hands to address the hall, but Mycon interrupts, insulting him. Mycon is not going to sit by and let Theon bully them into submission. Mycon is a man of House Stark, and he feels this betrayal of Theon even more than most. A bald Iron Man strikes Mycon in the stomach and across the face with his spear shaft, knocking him to his knees. And the issue you run into if you're Theon is, how can you even hope to rule the castle if you have people outspokenly criticizing you, calling you names, obviously disrespecting you? What do you do? And that's the issue you run into if you're Theon. And you might be thinking, well, Theon should never have betrayed the Starks. And that is the truth. He shouldn't have. But now that he's in this situation, he has to try and play a role. Bran orders Mycon to be silent, trying to sound authoritative like Robb, but coming out in a squeak. Remember, even Robb, when he was starting the story in A Game of Thrones, he struggled to be Robb the Lord so much that he kind of breaks down crying with Bran. Bran is so young, and he isn't even close to puberty at this point. Him trying to sound like a lord is just, it's not going to come out right. Theon tells Mycon to listen to Bran, then prompts Bran to declare he has yielded Winterfell. Bran obeys, loudly stating he has yielded Winterfell to Prince Theon and that everyone should follow his commands. Bran is trying to save his people from more heartbreak, from more harm, but unfortunately it doesn't work. Mycon refuses defiantly as Theon announces his father has crowned himself king of the Iron Islands and claims the North by conquest, making all present his subjects. The issue you run into is, well, how much have the Greyjoys taken in the north? They've taken, some of the western coast. They've taken Deepwood Mott. Theon has taken Winterfell, but doesn't have the forces to hold Winterfell. There's a battle going on at Torrhen's Square and all of that stuff with Dagmar, and then also Moat Caelin's going to be taken. But if you think about it, all of the major factions in the north are still widely untouched. So you can say Balon claims the North, but he hasn't done it. Mycon then curses the claim and declares he serves the Starks, prompting the bald man to smash him face first into the stone floor with his spear butt. This is strike 2. There will not be a strike 3 if Mycon continues to be defiant, and if you're Theon, you're being backed into a corner with what you can do on treating Mycon as a more or less captive. As we get into page 505, Theon says smiths have strong arms but weak heads, then tells the hall that if they serve him as loyally as they serve Ned Stark, he will be a generous lord. And that's the issue, is Theon wants so badly to be a lord, to be a prince, to be respected. He believes that it is his right. He hasn't earned that. And you understand why he believes that, because based upon Westerosi law, well, when you are set to inherit, you should get all this respect, all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot different because people like Ned and Robb have earned their respect. They have earned all of this kind of loyalty to them, whereas Theon hasn't. Theon has just betrayed the people that brought him up, especially in his teenage years, his more, I would say, informative years of who he's going to be as a person. He's betrayed everything that the Starks gave him. And these people are going to remember that, especially someone like Mycon. Mycon, on his hands and knees, spits blood and begins to insult Theon. Bran silently in his head wished that Mycon wouldn't, but it was too late. The bald Iron Man stabs Mycon through the neck, killing him as a woman screams, and Mira comforts Rickon. The home nice feeling of book 1 is really over. People are being murdered here in Winterfell. Mycon's somebody that is really important to the story in terms of making Arya's needle and Jon giving that to her and all of that kind of stuff is now died. And this is one of those moments where the show really combined a lot of different things that happens in A Clash of Kings with Theon's arc. And Mycon in a lot of ways serves to when Theon kills Roderick in the show. This is kind of that moment where somebody hates Theon so much, is willing to talk back to Theon, all that kind of stuff. But here it's done a little differently. Theon doesn't do his own killing, and Iron Man does it for him instead. Theon asks if anyone else has something to say, and Hodor shouts, "Hodor," repeatedly, and Theon orders someone to silence him. 2 Iron Men then beat Hodor with spear butts until he drops to the floor, shielding himself. Again, how are people going to care about Theon or respect Theon if he's okay with having people like Hodor, who seems very simple-minded, willing to just beat him to a pulp for no reason outside of he's just saying Hodor? And it goes to the whole problem of, okay, if you're going to rule with fear, let's say somebody like Maegor the Cruel, he ruled almost exclusively on fear. He was able to do that because he was one of the most fearsome warriors of all time. He had the reputation of the Targaryens. He had Balerion. He had put down multiple rebellions. He had shown his value and had gained respect, albeit he was also feared. Theon doesn't have respect, so people don't necessarily fear him either. Theon claims his forces will soon take Torrhen's Square, Deepwood Mott, and Moat Cailin, securing the north for House Greyjoy, even if Robb holds the south. And Theon's willing to say, Robb can hold, he can be king of the Riverlands, I don't care, but the north is now ours, which is kind of laughable. And even somebody like Reek/Ramsay speaks up, warning that Stark's bannermen will fight Theon and offering his service in exchange for his freedom. Theon considers, then agrees, telling Reek to bend the knee. But this is what's so crazy, is Theon is willing to accept people into his service without questioning them much at all and just blindly taking them into his service. If Reek is so quickly willing to shift from the Stark loyalties to Theon's loyalties, what does that say about him as a person? And we know this is going to backfire a lot on Theon, but it's just Theon is somebody that can be clever. He has moments of cleverness, but also can be extremely unintelligent as well. An Iron Man gives Reek a sword, which he lays at Theon's feet before swearing allegiance to House Greyjoy and King Balon. And Bran realizes the green dream is coming true and cannot even watch. Bran knows he could die to Ramsay. This has been seen in a dream, and so far all of Jojen's dreams have been correct. Osha steps forward, reminding Theon she was taken captive in his presence. Bran feels betrayed, thinking she was a friend. So a little bit different than the way it was done, I think, in the show. Whereas in the show, it seems very obvious that Osha is manipulating Theon. And we know that's the case in the book as well, but if you're coming at it from the book, we don't have a lot of those extra scenes of Osha. And Osha so far has seemed like a good friend to Bran. You know, she's been a likable character. And now all of a sudden, she steps out and is switching to Theon's side. And Theon should instantly be questioning this as well. Why is Osha all of a sudden willing to switch? Now, Osha gives her reasons, but still, Theon is accepting people almost blindly into his service because he wants to feel loved, respected, even feared. And this is exactly what people like Osha and Reek are giving to him. Both of them are manipulating him for very different reasons. Osha says Robb Stark put her in the kitchens and that she has been made to do menial work for nearly a year. She asks for a spear again. The bald Iron Man who killed Mycon made a cruel sexual remark to her, but as we get into page 506, Osha knees the bald man between the legs, telling him to keep his soft pink thing. She takes his spear and knocks him to the ground with the butt end. The other Iron Men laugh and Theon joins in. Theon tells Osha she'll do, lets her keep the spear, and orders her to bend the knee and swear loyalty. Osha, once again, is understanding what the Greyjoys value. They value strength, and the Ironborn don't necessarily care about women fighting. Like, they're a little bit more accepting of it. Like, for instance, Asha is willing to be a fighter and people respect her a lot. The same could be applied to someone like Osha. Osha is willing to stand up and is able to actually beat a Ironborn up, all that kind of stuff. It's showing how Osha is very intelligent on reading people and manipulating them. That's what's key here. And it's very important to understand when we see Osha and Rickon go off by themselves by the end of the book. When no one else came forward to pledge service, Theon dismisses the captives with a warning to work and not cause trouble. Hodor is assigned to carry Bran back to his bed. Hodor's face is swollen and bruised from the beating, one eye closed and his nose injured. And we end on one of the, I think, saddest ways you could possibly end a chapter. It really goes to confirm everything that Catelyn was thinking in her last chapter. And the tone of the story, I would say, drastically changes from this point on, especially for the northern side of things, in terms of Robb's campaign. Because after this moment, really Catelyn's POVs will never be the same. In terms of anything going on with Robb's campaign will always be viewed in a dark, moody, gloomy rain. This last line really proves that well, as we see this. Sobbing Hodor through cracked lips, he carries Bran out in the rain in his strong, bloody hands. It's a horrible way to end the chapter because it's so sad. Seeing someone like Hodor brought to crying, very emotional end to a chapter. And what's even crazier is we're going to go from Catelyn 6, which is a great chapter. We then go to Bran 6, another fantastic chapter, shifting up everything going on in the story. This is a foundational chapter for the entire series. We're then going to go to Arya 9, her second to last chapter as well, with her Weasel Soup chapter. And then we have the House of the Undying chapter right after. And when I tell you, when A Clash of Kings is at its peak, it just keeps going. And this is one thing I'm going to say for the rest of the story. I don't think there is a bad chapter or even a mid chapter left for this story. I think Jon's storyline really takes off from here. I think Bran has a great end to the story. Catelyn has a great end to the story. Arya's chapters are fantastic. Two of her best, I'd say, of the entire series. We have everything going on with the Battle of the Blackwater, the build-up, then it happening, and the resolution. And I think this is the craziest part. I was looking at it because we still have a good amount of chapters left, right? We're not going to get done with this series probably until February or March of next year. But one thing I found was super interesting is of about the 20, I think it's 5 or 6 chapters left, about half of them are King's Landing chapters. It really tells you where the focus of the story is going to go. We're resolving a lot of the other plots so that we can spend a ton of time with the King's Landing stuff, where we have a ton of Sansa chapters left. We have 5 Tyrion chapters left. We have a Davos chapter left. A lot of focus is going to be on that part of the storyline now as we move towards the end of the story. So thank you guys all for watching. It was a great chapter as always, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.